All right, and welcome to another exciting episode of WEDCOnomics, brought to you by Wolfeboro Community TV and Wentworth Economic Development Corporation. We are here to advise, finance, and promote the small business sector in the Eastern Lakes region of New Hampshire. I am Jack Terrill. I'm the Executive Director, and thank you very much for tuning into our podcast. It is global, folks, so keep that in mind. We have another special guest today. I'd like to introduce to you Marcus Weeks, President of Meredith Village Savings Bank. Marcus?
Jack, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for, let me just put that up there for a second. We'll talk about that later. Marcus, I wanted to talk, as you know, we focus on small business in this podcast, and there is a very crucial and important link to small business and banks in general, right? I mean, it's almost unavoidable for a small business to either get started or to grow without some sort of financial assistance. And so therefore, it would be great for small business entrepreneurs, whether they're starting out or wanting to grow, to understand how that relationship with a financial institution can either help them or hinder them
Absolutely.
in their growth. But first and foremost, Meredith Village Savings Bank is a mutual savings bank.
That's correct.
What is the difference between a mutual savings bank and a commercial bank?
So stock bank is
Stock bank.
typically how I refer to it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm happy to walk you through it.
Please do.
It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So mutuality is essentially it's an ownership or governance structure. If you think about most banks in our country, they were stood up because a person or a group of people saw a need and thought that they could capitalize a bank, meet the community's need, provide services that were not being delivered, and in doing so, derive return on their invested capital. So it's a business opportunity as much as it is an economic development exercise. Mutual banks, and New England is particularly fortunate to have so many. It's a high concentration of mutual banks.
More than, say, the rest of the country?
Yeah, certainly.
Per capita?
Per capita, New England, and then there's some in the Midwest as well. But unfortunately, it's a shrinking number. We're down to probably 450 mutual banks in our country.
That's it?
From a high of multiples of that. And so a mutual bank was founded for the same market opportunity. Somebody looked into the community and said that I can do it differently or better, or I can meet a need that's not being fulfilled. But instead of investing their capital with an expectation of a return on that investment, they donate their capital, basically capitalizing a community asset. So if you think about it, the decisions made in a mutual bank are done with three separate stakeholder groups in mind. Every decision is made through the lens of, is this right for the bank, for our customers, and for the community? There isn't the competing interest of, does this maximize shareholder value? So that is the biggest difference, and I think it is a competitive advantage for banks in delivering a differentiated customer experience, because everything is done with a really long time horizon in mind. We're not managing to quarterly earnings reports.
Which a stock bank, really, their major focus is return on the investor's investment.
Yep, that is their primary responsibility. Yep.
So a mutual is really here for the community. They're not driven by the need for quarterly returns per se, but still a mutual needs to be.
Profitability matters.
It
Absolutely.
matters, right? You got to stick around for a while.
For sure.
Has Meredith Village Savings Bank been around for a while?
Yeah, 155 years.
Is that all?
Yep. Yep.
And you've been the lead all that time?
I have not. I've been with the bank for 29 years, but I've been in the current position for about 2.
Yeah, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that. You have a legacy to live up to. I mean, I remember Bill Byer and just some wonderful people have led that bank for many years. And
with mutuality, we talk a lot about stewardship, right? We're there to steward steward the organization until it's time to turn it over to the next generation of managers to continue to benefit the communities we serve. Mm-hmm. And we've had a lot of great stewards over the years.
Do you think a mutual bank, well, first of all, there's mutual banks, and then there's locally headquartered mutual banks. Mm-hmm. And that's always an advantage to say, small businesses and the WEDCOs of the world, to have an association with a bank that's at least headquartered in New Hampshire, and if not even better, regionally headquartered where people are operating. And Meredith Village Savings Bank, surprisingly, is headquartered in Meredith.
We are. Yep.
Yeah. Do you think it's more likely that a mutual will get involved in loans for small businesses than a stock bank?
So, I'm not sure that mutuality matters so much in that regard. I think, so we use these terms, and sometimes they are interchangeable and sometimes they're not. So mutual banks refers to the organizational structure. Community banks refers to the size. And I think when it comes to the ability and willingness to serve small businesses, it's more of a question about whether it's a community bank than it is whether it's a mutual bank.
Okay.
So, it costs approximately the same for a bank to originate $1 million loan as it does a $50,000 loan. But the return on originating $1 million loan is obviously significantly bigger. And so as banks get larger, they dedicate more and more time and energy towards the biggest loans and less to the smaller loans. There are great community banks, there are great stock banks that are trying to find ways to effectively and efficiently solve for that problem, so with the implementation of more technology. But long answer to a short question, I think that if a small business owner can partner with a local community bank, they're more likely to find a partner that is it's going to be a mutually beneficial relationship.
Likely to be more responsive, more of a partnership per se than just a loan.
Yeah, a relationship, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So the market forces, just through their natural actions, are kind of leaving the small business loan area. And when I say that, I mean $50,000 to $400,000. That's kind of maybe that's why WEDCO exists, huh?
I think it's certainly an important function for WEDCO and organizations like it. There are loans of a size that makes them less attractive to some kinds of banks. There are businesses that are at a point in their maturation that makes them a little bit riskier than a lot of banks would be willing to take on. And so organizations like WEDCO, who can provide either financing in totality for that business or partnering with a local bank to take some of the risk off the bank, makes the bank more able and willing to say yes.
Yeah, I have found that one of the great places for WEDCO, Wentworth Economic Development Corporation, to reside is in partnership with banks to help get the loan done, because the bank is willing to go so far with their risk, but there's a missing piece there, and 9 times out of 10 the entrepreneur does not have that capital themselves, and WEDCO is willing to take a secondary position on collateral and essentially act as that entrepreneur's down payment.
Yep.
But what that does is that leverage that amount of what the bank was going to do, it got that out into the community, and if WEDCO is not there, it doesn't get out into the community, or at least in that particular case.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that it serves as a credit enhancement that makes a lot more transactions happen that wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah. And as you know, I mean, there's nothing more satisfying than getting, young, old, doesn't matter, but getting somebody down the path of ownership, because that's where you create generational wealth, or that's your best path to generational wealth.
Yeah. And when local small businesses thrive, communities thrive as well, because the profits stay local.
coming up here a couple years ago, and I've never really been on this side of the lake, but it's so clear how critical small business is to the local economy.
Absolutely.
It's all small business.
Yep.
It really. I wanted to. I knew you a long time ago when you first started, pretty much with Meredith Village Savings Bank. I just wanted to talk about your career path a little bit. You've come a long ways, and now you're president of Meredith Village Savings Bank. What were some of the jobs you had early on in your life, and just kind of run us through your career path a little bit.
Yeah, I've just been so fortunate through my career. I found the best company that I can imagine first. I started with Meredith when I was 16 years old.
16.
Yeah, I was a sophomore in high school. I went to Wolfeboro Academy, and back in those days, the guidance department ran what was called School to Work. It was a program where they helped facilitate internships into local businesses so that a student could get a sense of an industry that we're interested in before dedicating time, energy, and resources towards pursuing it as a profession. I had a sense that I was somebody who I wanted to be in business. I wasn't probably cut out for the trades, and so I didn't think banking necessarily, but it happened to be a relationship that the school had with Meredith Village Savings Bank. I wasn't the first student teller we had. There was a succession of them, and
what a great program!
It's a great program. Yeah. And we have so many people at the company today that started through that program.
Is that right?
Vice presidents, senior vice presidents, examples all over the company. It's wonderful.
That kind of speaks also to that community bank thing, getting engaged with the local high school. The big operations may or may not take an interest in something like that because it takes effort. It takes effort on the behalf of the organization, the bank, to stay with this program. But it sounds like it paid off pretty well for the bank by being a part of that program.
I like to think so. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have senior vice presidents.
We do.
So you never had another job in your life?
I caddied for one summer.
You caddied for one?
Yeah.
Where did you caddy?
Bald Peak.
Bald Peak?
Yep, we were just talking about that. Not very well, I would also add.
Well, I caddied when I was young, and that had a fairly profound impact on my life. I learned a ton by being a caddy, and interpersonal relationships and how to deal with people. Did you have a similar experience?
I did. I mean, people were gracious and kind, and I think that you learn as a young person, it's to be a fly on the wall, listening to interesting conversations.
Yeah. Are there people that are still there that remember you as a caddy?
Oh, 30 years later, probably not. Like I said, I only did it for one summer.
Everybody has mentors in their life. Everybody has somebody. I still remember Mrs. North from grade 2. She had a profound impact on my life. And something I appreciate very much, and I think of her often, and she's far from the only one that's had an impact on my life. Talk about some of the mentors in your life. You don't have to talk about them by name, but some of that sort of the guidance you received simply through their graces or because they were that way, and how that has impacted you in your life.
Yeah, I mean, so I've had a succession of great mentors, some that they were formal relationships that we called mentorship, others that were not, but they had the same, if not greater, impact. I've been fortunate that I've had the right mentors offering me the right education at the right time. There are times in your life where what you need is to better understand your industry and the technical workings of how a bank operates. I've had mentors who have been incredibly patient, walking me through more than one time the inner workings of the finance industry. I've had mentors who didn't teach me a lot about banking, but taught me a lot about presenting yourself as a professional. the importance of being detail-oriented, the importance of, and the bank has a culture of this, but certainly there were examples of people who I watched them get engaged in their communities and what that did in terms of fulfilling them as a human, strengthening the community that they were working to serve, and reflects back to them positively in the business environment. That is something that I would say has been key to my career trajectory. Is I've been very involved in a number of community organizations, and there's a lot of reasons I've done it. I mean, certainly because I believe in every organization that I've ever associated myself with, but also some of the best business relationships that I've ever been able to develop and grow and bring back to the bank have started in those boardrooms or
right?
in those service opportunities. Yeah, absolutely.
And we all, well, maybe we all don't, but from my United Way days and all the way up to here, but community banks have always had a culture of getting employees involved in other things outside of the bank, but in the community. And again, it's obviously beneficial to the organizations that have people come in that bring a different point of view, have a different expertise, and they share it, and you learn, and so it helps the organization, but it helps the bank as well.
In multiple ways. So it helps the bank because most communities have a relatively small number of active people who are involved in everything. Those are the people who you want to associate yourself and build your professional network with.
The 20/80 rule?
I don't know if it's 20/80, 90/10,
yeah.
But it's, the number of people who I've served on multiple boards with, because they're reaching out across different organizations as well, it's hard to count. The other way it benefits the bank is that community banks' fortunes are tied directly to the fortunes of the communities they serve. If a community is thriving, the bank will thrive. And communities thrive because of business investment, but also because great nonprofits are there meeting the need that is being unmet by business and government.
That's a good point. How would you rate? My focus is Eastern Lakes region, but sort of our general around the lakes. How do you think we as a community are doing?
As far as prosperity, as far as nonprofit.
Are we trending towards thriving, or are we trending in a different direction?
I think that the Lakes region of New Hampshire, and New Hampshire in general, has a lot of competitive advantages that are going to allow it to outperform a lot of its regional and national peers. Is it likely that someday the economy softens? Sure, right? The economies are cyclical, but I like we've had a tremendous amount of good demographic growth in the wake of the COVID pandemic. We've seen an influx of people, relatively high earners, who are able to work from here or choose to be here and stand up a business because after having the opportunity to live in New Hampshire, they don't want to go back to where they were grinding away prior to that experience. So I really like how well things are performing in the Lakes region and New Hampshire in general today.
Carroll County leads in population growth of all the counties in New Hampshire. The 11 Carroll counties leading the way right now, which is very impressive.
It is. For so long, the only development, the only population growth we were seeing was in the southern tier, just over the Massachusetts border.
Right.
And I think that the way people work has changed so dramatically that why wouldn't you live here if you were able to find gainful employment, to continue a career that you found fulfilling in the suburbs of Boston? You can do that here and then walk out your back door to the mountains and the lakes. I mean, it's just a pretty special place to be.
After 10 years in Florida, and 50 before that here in New Hampshire, I can tell you that it was nice when I got back to be reminded how physically beautiful this state is.
Yeah, it's special.
And today I'm not hunkering down for a hurricane.
It's true. Yep. Well,
So-
feels like there's one outside.
Yeah, it's a little wet today, but that's all right. I want to talk a little bit, get some of your advice for those that are watching or listening and thinking about starting a small business or thinking of taking that idea that's been nagging in their head for a while and putting it to paper and saying, okay, let's go forward. What sort of advice would you give somebody that's saying, hey, I think I want to open up my own business?
Yeah, so I think something you just said is the first step, putting it to paper. Approaching your startup in a thoughtful and detailed way, you leveraging a lot of the resources that are available in our communities to access people who have been there and done it before. There's organizations like WEDCO. I know that you guys are always happy to talk to people as they're considering their entrepreneurial path. Your local banker is going to be willing to do that. There are I'm drawing a blank on the word I want to use there, but there are agencies like SCORE where you provide mentorship through volunteerism. SCORE is the Service Corps of Retired Executives.
And Small Business Development Center has a free program for...
So I would say there's that. I would say once you start your business, it is human nature to want to grow it really quickly. You get momentum, you're excited, and I think that if you have an opportunity, you absolutely want to strike while the iron is hot. Understand your core competency and master it before trying to spread yourself too thin. I've seen people who, when they run into trouble, it's because they've gotten out over their skis instead of building a solid foundation under themselves. Really understand your numbers. A lot of people who are good at, they're great cooks, find that running a restaurant is really challenging because the financial piece of it is not what they're naturally comfortable with, suited at too, and so you've got to be good at that, or else you won't know where you can take your business. And as you spend time focusing on the numbers, people get really good at the balance sheet. They understand their income statement, so what's coming in, they understand their expenses, but it's the cash flow. Really understanding your uses and sources of cash so that you can forecast into the future where any challenges may arise, because the number of businesses that fail not because of a lack of profitability but because of cash crunch is stunning. That is something that an entrepreneur needs to work really hard to avoid.
So what you just said was, of all the financial statements, and they all matter, profit and loss, balance sheet, the most important one for a small business is the cash flow.
So I think you could say that. Certainly it's the one that needs to be paid more attention to. I don't know that it's any more important than the income statement, because having your arms around cash flow but selling every product at a loss does you no good either. But the average entrepreneur puts the cash flow statement on the back burner and doesn't get comfortable with it in the same way they do everything else.
Okay, let's just break down what a cash flow statement is, what it's telling somebody, and what they should be. What is a cash flow statement?
Yeah, a cash flow statement is going to tell them all of their sources and uses of cash, when they should expect that cash to come in the door, and when the cash needs to go out the door. And so they can understand if there's going to be a moment in time where there is a cash deficiency. So businesses put a lot of their cash into other assets, so they're not liquid at the moment, but they still have these needs of liquidity. And so to understand, particularly, the easy example is when somebody has durable goods. So you invest your cash into inventory, you put that
Let's
inventory...
call them washing machines.
Sure. So you buy a truckload of washing machines, you've used up some cash or potentially credit, and until you turn that back into cash by selling it, you've got the same level of assets, but all of a sudden you may not be able to pay the rent because you don't have the liquidity to do that. So understanding how to make sure that you're turning your inventory, your durable goods, your receivables back into cash in a timely enough manner where you're meeting your obligations.
Can a relationship with a bank assist in that that process.
Absolutely. I think business should always have access to a line of credit in some way, shape, or form. Managing the cash flow so as not to need to draw it and accrue that interest expense. If you can avoid it, that's terrific. But having it there and available to you to bridge the gap is such an important business tool. Yeah.
Yeah, because you could torpedo what was going to be a great thing, and is actually performing fairly well.
Yeah.
But you're unable to meet certain obligations.
Sitting on a pile of accounts receivable that you're going to collect in 30 days, but if you can't pay your vendors, they're not going to bring you that next delivery.
What if you're sitting on a pile of cash? Is that almost as bad?
I mean, it can be. I would absolutely rather have too much cash than too little. I think,
you and me both, brother.
I think most most business owners would say that. But yeah, if you're not maximizing your assets, if you're not investing back into the business, if you're too conservative, then that brings with it its own set of challenges, for sure.
Is there a rule of thumb out there that says, how much you should be pouring back into the business versus holding?
Not really. I think it's industry dependent.
Industry.
There are some businesses that are not capital intensive at all, and so you're able to take a lot of cash out of the business and still have plenty reinvested to grow the business at a reasonable pace. There are others where it's very, very capital intensive, and you're going to be carrying debt on the business for the foreseeable future. I think it's important to understand your individual circumstances and compare it's an incredibly valuable exercise to compare yourself against industry peers. There are a lot of resources out there that'll give you financial metrics of the industry that you're in, and you can understand from that perspective, maybe targeting your own metrics.
That's a really good point, and it sounds like one that you would endorse, and that is, you start your own business. It is going to fit likely within a scheme of whatever industry it might be, and there are actually associations out there specific to that industry, and in those associations there are metrics out there that can help you. So you would endorse getting trade magazines, whatever, if they're out there for that particular industry, or certainly finding either statewide or nationwide some associations that are in the same industry.
Absolutely. And so that provides you with an opportunity to network with people who have been there and done it before, and ideally you can learn from their mistakes and not duplicate them. And I find, particularly if you're not in competitive markets, business people are very willing to offer advice, and particularly to the next generation that's coming up behind them. The other thing where I think industry associations do a lot of good is they help lobby for the appropriate level of regulation and legislation that allows your business to thrive in a responsible manner. And I think that most industries have some level of lobbying organization associated with their industry that it's worth looking at and seeing if you're able to support them, because it will come back to you in the end.
So just to kind of finish up here, in your opinion, Marcus, how important is it for the new small business or the growing small business, the entrepreneur, to be connected to the community in which she serves?
I think it's imperative. For so many reasons. Most businesses, particularly when I think of the kinds of businesses that we have here in the Eastern Lakes region, their customers are local to these communities. And so as you network and as you build relationships, you are introducing your brand and your services to a pool of potential customers. You're also driving a brand and a reputation that will help you in attracting the employees that you need to be successful in growing your business. People want to work at a business where they feel that aligns with their own value system. And if you can get involved with the community in a way that demonstrates that you care about the place where you live and you work, then employees are going to be more apt to want to work with and for you because they're going to want to contribute to your success because that bleeds over to the success of the community.
You're good, Marcus.
Hey.
That's it, folks. We're already out of time. Whoop, there it goes. Great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. Marcus Weeks, president of Meredith Village Savings Bank. And we were talking about banking and small business and how it all can, and community, and how it all can roll into what we all want, which is success for all involved.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your time, Marcus. Appreciate your support, and I appreciated the golf the other day.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, Marcus. Thank you, and guys, thank you everybody for tuning in, and Timothy, thank you for the services of Wolfeboro Community TV. Remember them in your giving, folks, and we will see you at the next episode of WEDCOnomics.